We're here in Canberra for Solar 2010, a conference which brings together both international and local industry leaders to discuss the future of solar in Australia. The annual Solar 2010 conference was held at the start of December at the Australian National University in Canberra. The conference was opened by the ACT Minister for the Environment, Climate Change and Water, Simon Corbell. Minister Corbell acknowledged how appropriate it was for such an event to be held in Canberra. The ACT's solar feed-in tariff is now the country's most generous, with a gross rate of 45 cents, and the state aspires to become Australia's solar capital. Guest speaker US Ambassador Jeffrey Blyke reasoned that governments should choose renewable energy for more than just environmental reasons.
The short version is we're relying on fuels that are exhaustible and that will be exhausted. From an economic and security point of view, this is dangerous.
Mr. Blyke said that governments needed to turn to renewable energy in order to also prevent their economies from becoming dependent on oil-rich countries. Deputy Leader of the Australian Greens, Senator Christine Milne, said that Australia must decarbonise by 2030, which means more than just imposing a carbon tax. Senator Milne said that solar subsidies are needed to offset the subsidisation of coal-fired energy.
We need a price on pollution plus a mechanism to bring on large-scale renewables in a time frame to decarbonise developed economies by 2030 at the latest. So that's why you need a national gross feed-in tariff. In Australia, in the absence of one, we have a higgledy-piggledy mess of state net tariffs, largely gross in some places, net in others, and it's a competition between the states, and it's hopeless as far as investors are concerned, and it's changed on a whim, as occurred in New South Wales. It pulls the rug out from any certainty into the future.
She spoke of the approach of peak coal and the necessity of developing technologies which utilise infinite energy resources.
There is now a view that we are reaching the point where demand for high-quality coal around the world is outstripping supply and will continue to outstrip supply, which will drive up the price of coal. Solar energy is already much cheaper than coal if you factor in the actual costs of coal. The climate change we are suffering now is a result of carbon dioxide going to the atmosphere free. So all of the coal companies have been able to benefit from free pollution of the atmosphere, and that's gone into their profit bottom line, and we are now all paying for the consequences.
Dr. Larry Kazmierski, Executive Director of Science and Technology at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in the US, shared a brief history of solar energy. He showed the audience a version of the Vanguard 1, the first solar-powered satellite, which was launched in 1958. Dr. Kaz, as he is affectionately known by his peers, spoke of the great potential of solar as the future for the world's energy needs. Comparing solar maps of Germany, the US, and Australia, he said that if the solar market can be so big and successful in Germany, then it certainly can be here as well. Dr. Kaz also commented on media speculation on the connection between rising electricity prices and solar subsidies in Australia.
I think that, like in many cases, solar sometimes gets too much credit, and in many more cases it gets blamed for too many things. The price of electricity on an annual basis has been going up every year for 30 years. In the United States, for instance, about 2% a year. The price of that electricity has never gone down. Yes. So we have to realize that we're blaming solar. We should blame it for what happened 30, 40, 50 years ago, even if the price increases came then. So I think it's a little unfair. Don't blame solar for what happens on a wider scale with electricity markets and the price of electricity.
The conference was hosted by the Australian Solar Energy Society. CEO John Grimes was encouraged by the near maximum capacity attendance of the conference, which signifies the unity of the solar industry. Mr. Grimes says it was crucial that governments understand the importance of supporting the solar industry.
For us, what governments have done in the past is they've played around with solar policy a bit like a political football. They've been very knee-jerk in the way that they deal with things. So you have situations where either there's massive over-support for solar or massive under-supports for solar. What we have to do is take this industry seriously. We can deliver serious emission reductions to Australia, and we can over time bring the cost of electricity down. So first there has to be better coordination between state and federal governments. We need to say strategically we want solar to be at the point of grid parity by 2014, 2015. To do that we need to deploy as much solar as possible. The more solar we deploy, the more prices come down and the more they get passed on to people. So have a strategic plan from a government perspective to allow us to really make massive changes in the way that we produce electricity.
Dr. Kaz's unique tie designs were also a hit at the conference. John Grimes was lucky enough to receive one of these wearable works of art.
This is courtesy of Larry Kersmensky, who else, from NREL in Golden, Colorado. Larry's a great character and I'm really pleased to be wearing his solar tie.
The Solar 2010 conference continued for 3 days with workshops, speakers and tours of the Australian National University's PV labs, providing insights into developing technologies and commentary on the future of solar in Australia.